Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's FORS webinar, Navigating Sustainability in Fleet Management. This webinar is hosted by DEKRA, Ian Bohill from Essex Bulk Services, and Geraint Davies, FORS Director. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please use the chat function to ask your questions throughout, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. We'll be including 2 polls today, so please fill them out if you can, and the recording of this webinar will be circulated after. So over to you, William, who will get started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly, for the quick introductions. We'll come to a round of introductions of who's on the call in just a moment. But today's webinar, as Holly said, is all about navigating sustainability in fleet management. We're going to cover as much as we can in a quick 20 minutes today, a lot of information for you guys to take away, which hopefully helps you in the next steps that are coming for V7 next year, as well as the demands coming for sustainability from your customers, your suppliers, and other people. So the agenda for today is a quick background and a landscape to sustainability. I'm going to talk all about how we're progressing towards a sustainable future and how FORS is helping do that, and how DEKRA as an affinity partner is helping do that. I'm going to talk about how this all ties together, what you really need to consider as operators, and some of the services that are available to you exclusively through FORS. We'll also talk about case studies of really good work going on within the FORS program, as well as an MOT, if you will, that's available exclusively to people who are on the call today, only to people who are on the call today and can make it. So thanks for joining. We'll do a quick round of introductions. So I'll start off very quickly. My name is William Soper. I'm the Head of Sustainability Services at DEKRA in the UK and in Ireland. I've been doing sustainability for over a decade. I sit on the board for Technical Advisory Group for the Institute of Chemical Engineers, where I look after SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production. I've been working with a variety of clients, from people like ESA, all the way down to small businesses and the logistics sector, to help them decarbonize, help them become more sustainable, and create the change needed to meet their 2050 targets. My colleague Shrey is on the call today. He's the consultant who works on the program and is here to answer questions. He is a little bit under the weather, but he will do his best to answer if you've got any particular questions about the service. Geraint, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining. I'm Geraint Davies. I'm FORS Director. I've got quite a long background in the road transport industry, having worked for an operator for 22 years, finally finishing off as COO. Been in this role for well over a year now. I've also served on the board of directors of the Road Haulage Association and chaired UK Road Trade Council at Westminster. And yeah, I'm very much in tune with the challenges of a road transport operation, having been an operator myself. And of course, I got a class 1 and a PSV, so I do understand and feel the pain that operators are currently enduring.
Brilliant. Thanks, Geraint. Ian?
I'm Ian Bohill. I'm General Manager for Essex Bulk Services. I've been with Essex Bulk Services 9 months. Previous to that, I did 27 years with a company that employed EBS as their haulier. Got a big background, a bit like Geraint. I've been in transport all my life, from being a vehicle engineer to driving trucks to now to the position I'm in now with Essex Bulk Services.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian. So we've got some real practical knowledge and experience with sustainability coming from the operators, also from the FORS scheme, and from sustainability experts here at DEKRA here on the call today. So hopefully, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well as we go through, and we'll have a Q&A session right at the end where Holly will help take us through that. So, but to start things off, we do have a quick poll for the chat. So do you agree that all businesses should have a target to reach net zero? Now, it is an open question. If you wouldn't mind answering it, that'd be fantastic. Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, that's great. It's always good to ask. I think one of the critical things about the industry is there's so many targets, so many requests for different types of ESG data, but net zero is a really critical one, and one that really is a focus when it comes to fleet operators, as well as safety, security, and all of their aspects on the road. So I can see 87% of people said yes. So the overwhelming majority of people on the call today definitely think they should, and I'll touch on why you most certainly should in just a few slides. So let's talk a bit about the landscape to give you guys some rounded background to sustainability and what's driving that in the sector. When we look at what's driving sustainability in the UK, we are part of a global supply chain. At the bottom of the screen, you can see a fleet operator, and you have upstream and downstream parts, your suppliers and customers that you work with as part of that, getting goods and resources manufactured, produced, transported on the back of HGVs, trucks, freight, you name it, all the way to a customer and a market at the end. Now, in these central markets, particularly the larger ones like America, China, and the European Union, there are standards, mandatory standards, that are driving new ESG disclosures, mandatory reporting for companies. These are starting to surface now and be cascaded down through the supply chain. So you may be asked by your customer or by your supplier, can you tell us a bit about your environmental management policy? Can you tell us a bit about your number of incidents? Can you tell us about your carbon emissions and whether you have a net zero plan in place? And this is what is predominantly driving that. Customer demands are coming to operators today to ask to disclose more ESG data. And if you don't have that data, you may well be excluded from the tender process, you may lose contracts, and believe it or not, today over 50% of tender processes include requests for ESG data, and that is growing year on year. So if you don't have it and you don't have a robust way of reporting that data, it can really impact your business bottom line. The second driver behind that, and probably the most important driver, is regulatory requirements. So behind the scenes, behind this evolving ESG regulatory data, that's pushing the requirements through to customers and down the supply chain to operators. So it is driven by the mandatory regulation, but it's also driven by your customer requests. Lastly, you also have the costs and efficiencies. I don't think it's anything new within the supply chain world, but all businesses are trying to drive a more robust, resilient, and cost-effective supply chain. And part of that is also trying to make sure there's good standards in place when it comes to safety, security, resilience in their operators and who they work with and businesses. So there's a lot of factors here, but that ultimately through those markets is driving us forward to a more sustainable and net zero future. Why is that super critical to operators in the UK? Well, the context really is that transport is one of the most high emitting sectors. It's responsible for 26% of the emissions in 2021, and it is actually legally blinding for businesses in the UK. So we're one of 10% of countries that are we have legally enshrined net zero into the UK. So in order to continue to do business, you need to be able to demonstrate by 2050 that you have achieved net zero. Okay? To do that, to actually evidence that, data gathering is really key. That comes back to the 3 R's that FORS use: record, report, and reduce. So it's really important to get data gathering early. That's because some of those larger companies, so you can see on screen the CSRD, are being driven to report. So for larger companies, that's becoming mandated in the European Union, which has one of the leading standards called the CSRD in 2026. But they have to gather all that data next year in 2025, which coincides almost perfectly with FORS V7. Then afterwards, you've got the SMEs that have to report as well within the European Union, and any company that has any significant holdings. So if you operate in the European Union, you have assets over there that are working, then you may have to report in the EU in 2028. To get all this data together, to have it checked, ready, and available is really critical. And to continue to do business, it's part of your social license to operate. So how's that being driven? It's from 2 sides. So FORS has now introduced and started to introduce V7 requirements, which Geraint will touch on in just a moment. But those requirements include everything you need to have a safe and sustainable fleet, as well as a productively as well. So you've got compliance elements, FORS documentation, all underpinned by your staff and resources, your policies and procedures. But now it also includes things like a decarbonisation plan with short, medium and long-term goals. It includes ESG reporting initiatives. And that overlaps quite importantly with those mandatory requirements, the pieces that customers are going to come to you and ask for. Things like, do you have a strategy for net zero? Do you have availability of other social and governance data? Things like working conditions, labour standards. These things driven through frameworks like CSRD are really important, and our affinity partner services help make sure that all those elements are in place, then you can respond to them. All of this is underpinned by pre-audits, so readiness assessments, audit programs and assurance programs to make sure that we've got good quality data, robust data, and that we can form an accurate plan to reduce our carbon, to reduce the number of safety incidents, to make ourselves a more sustainable operator. This is the position today, but it's a long-term journey, and FORS, DECRA, all of us are on this journey together. There's going to be a new standard probably in the next 5 years, which will continue to push us towards this trajectory towards net zero and to being a more sustainable operator. So you can see how year on year, as those regulations come forward, we'll be starting to introduce new elements, new things we have to tackle, new challenges, but with FORS and with DECRA, we'll all be ready together for the change. But we're starting the process now. So to touch more on FORS specifically, I'm going to hand over to Geraint. Right.
Okay, so for me, from my perspective, FORS has had to evolve. It's evolved anyway with GSAG. Version 7 was quite a long way down the road when I joined probably about 14 months ago. And I was in the tail end of discussions of the final elements of version 7. And there were some shalls in there that are now shoulds. And we've taken a pragmatic view because I don't set the FORS standard. Like I said, that's set by the Governance Standards Advisory Group, but I certainly have a voice and a powerful voice at that table, particularly seeing things unashamedly through an operator's lens. Like I said from the outset, I understand where you were coming from. I understand the challenges of operators. 500 operators went bust last year. 550 are going to go bust this year if we continue the current trajectory, and that's not taking into account those that have just given up because it doesn't make viable sense anymore. But there's one key word here that we've got to consider: change. I remember when I first started in the transport industry, I remember what the traffic office was like with the big CRT monitors and very analog sort of processes, trucks on a wall and things like that, maintenance planners on the wall. Remember the first truck I drove, Seddon Atkinson 401, shunting around the yard, just learning before I did my class 1. Eaton twin splitter, played some lovely tunes on it because it was a crash box. Then the Volvo with the Synchromesh, you know, the 4x4 and the FL10s. And then we see the automated manual gearbox come in. And then from sort of 2005, we didn't have a manual gearbox in the fleet. And then digital tachographs came in, of course. Then from a sustainability and we had Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, and then we were all worried about Euro 3 and the impact that was going to have on fuel economy back in 2001. And then Euro 4, 2006, 2007, we had to have AdBlue. Some people went straight to Euro 5, which I did because it made sense to do it. And we've seen all these changes coming through gradually and as things evolve. And it's important for me to see that FORS is in lockstep with what's happening with the wider picture, the wider regulatory sort of landscape, and version 7 is aligned with what's coming down the tracks. And I think it's important that FORS is there to help operators, and it's not seen as a hindrance, and is very much a thank God I've got than a wish I had. And the same it could be said for the emissions type packages, because this is coming down the road. You know, organizations that weren't previously in scope. My former organization, it was an SME, wasn't in scope, will shortly be in scope. So all these challenges are going to be coming along the road towards us. So from the 2nd of January 2025, FORS version 7 is going to have some additional requirements calculating well-to-wheel emissions, for example, and things like that. But these are nothing to be scared of. For example, there's, aside from the regulatory aspect that we're going to have to do, there's a customer-facing aspect to this. I remember being at a board meeting, at an RHA board meeting a couple of years ago, and I had a call, which I then took it during the break. I said, or what's the problem? Well, can we have your well-to-wheel carbon calculations for the work you do for us for tomorrow? And this was a major dairy that we were working for. But luckily, because we were a FORS Gold operator, and I understood what that meant. But the people that don't understand that, and customers can be quite demanding, like has already been said, with tender processes and things like that. And if you want to be in the game, you know, you've got to be in it to win it with this sort of thing going on. So there's it's clear that decarbonisation is going to play a key part going forward. So whether you buy into it or you don't, it's coming at us nevertheless. So the 3 R's of sustainability: we've got to record our carbon emissions, report our carbon emissions. The reporting is going to be as important as reporting financial data and financial accounts on Companies House and things like that. So it's going to be treated in the same manner, and the penalties are going to be in the same way. So reduce carbon emissions. So if you're not recording and reporting, how will you ever know if you can make any impact? So it's the old thing, isn't it? If it's not measured, it's not managed. So we've introduced as well a new FORS practitioner course, an introduction to fleet decarbonisation. So that it goes some way to explaining, well, more than some way, to explaining what all this jargon is in layperson's terms. So the next slide, please. So bronze, we've got some changes, particularly in O2, whereby you've got to calculate your AdBlue to your fuel usage as a ratio. But you should be doing that anyway, because if you did have a visit from the DVSA and you had something called an MIVR, one of the questions would be, how much AdBlue are you using? Because of the previous issues that the DVSA had with AdBlue cheat devices and things like that. So it's aligned with that anyway. So training, of course, training is always important, the social aspects and the governance, which we know in the management part of FORS Bronze. And the next slide, please. And then silver, the reporting of carbon output is going to be a little bit different. Of course, we all knew we used to put the emissions data in. There's going to be a form of an emissions calculator that's going to be rolled out shortly. So the review of environmental impact, fleet considerations, low carbon or no carbon vehicles, even the use of HVO being the lowest of low-hanging fruit. We did a webinar a few weeks ago on that. I'm sure the recording of that's available somewhere. Fleet transition comes in gold. Decarbonisation, training. We know we've got the FORS e-learning and things like that. Low city still applies to gold. And then the social aspects, and then the governance. What we mean by that is when you've got the flow down clauses for the subcontractors that sometimes you need to use to cover those and smooth those peaks. And the next slide, please. So then we've got environmental impact gold. These are the exemplar operators. So there's always been a cut above. So there's a few more things in gold. Decarbonisation strategy with long-term emissions targets. And, you know, we can have a plan. Plans change. We can have a roadmap. Roadmaps change. Fleet transition. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. It depends on who you're talking to. I just did a presentation this morning to the London boroughs. And they were talking about EVs. EVs work great around here. I'm actually in London today, but maybe not so well in South Wales, where the topography is different. Some people prefer biomethane. Some people have gone for solely HVO as they see how the lay of the land is. I've run trucks in the past on LNG. So decarbonisation, implement detailed decarbonisation strategy, an action plan for reducing fleet emissions. like I said, you could be looking at bio blends or things like that. Training, obviously drivers have to do the low city training, but that has been revamped as well massively for version 7. Well, not for version 7, just in general. It was way overdue a refresh. It's now a 3.5-hour module. I used to deliver that to my drivers, and it was painful to deliver, let alone sit through. And I used to try and make it as interesting as possible for the drivers by sort of articulating how much a tanker of diesel is and things like this, and people were quite shocked. So, you know, you can save money with these things as well by sort of instilling in the staff and the drivers the importance of reducing carbon, because it goes hand in glove with fuel reduction, fuel usage reduction, and also cost. Then you've got the social, the CSR elements, and again, the governance. So if you want to know what the key differences are between version 6 and version 7, you can go on the FORS website. If you click on the version 6 icon, that will then take you to another page, and you'll have version 7 there. And there's also a very simple ready reckoner as to what the details are, what the changes are. It is not as scary as you think. So just have a look at it, digest it. There's quite a few elements that are not changing, but like we said, this sustainability part is. Now, it's important to note this DEKRA product isn't mandatory for version 7, but it can certainly help you along life's way. And forget about FORS for a minute. Like I said about the customers asking and things like that, the customers asking for this information, and the and even regulators. So it's going to be important that you're in tune with it going forward. So, as well as the FORS standard in version 7. So back to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Geraint. That's a really good summary of all those changes. So the other thing we'll be doing after this session, so we'll be sending out this quick map. There is the link that's been put in the chat too with all the changes, but this DEKRA map hopefully gives you the quick stop tour of each of the artifacts that you maybe should check to see if you've got, and if you don't have them, it might be a good idea to have a look through that change list and really check what is the specific requirement. How can we close that gap and look at that? And of course, we're here to help where we can. Speaking of, we're going to talk about some of the change that has been taking place with a partner of ours. So Ian, you're on the call today. You've been working with us at Essex Bolt Services, and it'd be great to understand what the benefits have been for you to make this sustainable change.
Thank you. With a number of benefits. As an operator, we found the DEKRA assessment tool very easy to use and complete. The tool leads you through the tasks. So as you go through the tools, it's set up in a way that it leads you through the tasks. It asks you questions, and then with them questions will be an explanation of what's being asked. So it's not just a question of asking you how much fuel do you burn. It'll give you an understanding of why it's asking that question. When using the tool, it's very easy to drag and drop documents into it, so that need to be added, and you can save your progress. It's not something that you have to do all in one go. You can do it in bite-sized chunks. You can spend an hour on it today and then come back to it a couple of days later and spend an hour on it. By using the DEKRA tool, us as a business at EBS, we realised a number of benefits. We reduced our fleet size slightly through using the tool, because that helped us develop our decarbonisation strategy. We've signed up to Net Zero 2050 through the evidence we've got from the tool. By using the tool on the sustainability side, we engaged with our staff and some of our partners, and through that, we've revisited some of the decisions that we made last year as a business, and that included we were in the process of closing our main yard and our workshop facility, but we've revisited that, and we're in the process of reversing that decision. We've also involved our external stakeholders, so some of the businesses we've worked for, they were asked questions about what they saw within the sustainability, and that's helped us align with some of their net zero goals. Next slide, please, Will. This is a video. Gavin Will's going to play it.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll just put this on for everyone. Let me know if you can hear it.
Next slide, please, Paul. So, but going through the process, we've identified a number of benefits, including some cost savings. We've nominated a lead for ESG. We've identified a number of quick wins for our sustainability strategy. We've been able to support one of our customers towards their net zero targets, and it has got us ready for FORS version 7.
Brilliant. No, thanks, Ian. And again, I think what's really critical in the process, and we found this, Ian, was the driver is a really key part of the picture. You know, that's often forgotten. At the end of the day, it is the people who are running the trucks every day within your business, engaging those people through the process. And sustainability is going to be a big change from the vehicles we drive right down to how we work every day. So just like that, V7 is going to be a bit of an adjustment. And what we wanted to give was some best practices to take home today off the call to help you. So V7's coming next year, but please make sure you prepare in advance. Gathering ESG data for a small, medium-sized business, in our experience, takes quite a few months, maybe between 3 and 6 months, and you want to make sure that is properly reviewed with all the relevant materials. You need to understand who is needed and who is responsible in your business. Just like Ian did, elect an officer. Have someone responsible and accountable to drive that forward. Otherwise, in our experience, it may not necessarily get done. Make sure you sign it off properly. Often an element missed is they'll have a strategy or see a document. It's not been signed off or sponsored by anyone in the business, and it's just a page. If it is a sustainability plan, it needs to be embedded in your business strategy. If it's not part of your business plan, it's not going to realize a cost saving and real benefit. It's got to have commitment right from the top all the way through the business. Try and use the ISO standards and the gold practices and the FORS guidance. There are international standards available from the Science Based Targets Institute through to the ISO standards to how you should properly measure things like well to tank emissions and carbon emissions. Use those references and best practice standards because that will help you have an accurate and proper report. And lastly, do try to access third-party support if you need it. And we as a partner in sustainability and decarbonisation, exclusively for FORS members, you get access to us at a cost-effective and discounted rate, even just by the hour. If you have any questions as well, we're always here to answer smaller ones where we can. So what does our service do? Look, we are really focused on the full elements of E, S, and G. This is all related to the mandatory standards for the CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is the leading current standard within the European Union, and many other standards, be it China, America, are aligning and learning from that standard as well. It's interoperable. It's important really to make sure you're ready for all those other elements. Your customers will come to you and ask you about all the other elements when it comes to social and governance risks. What our tool does is a quick online on-demand tool, very easy to use, gives you guidance and instructions about how you can prepare that yourself, and gives you a score and any actions for where you need to improve that. Access to and playback from one of our specialists too will walk you through what you need to do to best close those gaps. And we also make sure that we do look through and check things like your carbon reporting data to the ISO standards. So very useful second check to make sure that all gaps are covered. So how you use the service, it's a self-assessment tool. You just register online, you get immediate access. There are over 80 plus questions where you can submit the evidence. An ESG advisor is available to review that and formulate a report, and it can be done whenever you're free and convenient. We know that businesses are busy, so if you want to do it quickly in a month, or whether you want to take several months or even half a year to perform that, you can do it at a pace that suits you and your business. Afterwards, you get a report, and through this whole process, you have access to consultants to support you through that journey. That playback will really help you align with both CSRD, the forthcoming standard from the European Union, and through V7, ensuring that you're holistically prepared for any ESG data requirements. So thank you very much for listening today. I think the critical thing for us as well is that we want to make sure that all people have a partner through this change. DEKRA have been a company working in the transport sector for over 100 years, and we want to make sure for the next 100 years that all operators in the sector keep running on the road, and we're just there as a seatbelt to help you every step of the way. We're offering a free consultation to anyone here today who would just like to have a chat about any of those themes. If you want to talk about V7, whether you want to have a little bit of a look through some of those individual elements on the map or the guidance, whether you just want to have a chat about any other ESG data requests that you don't have an answer for, we're here to help as part of FORS. And you can book in by clicking the link on the page now, or by using your camera and going via the QR code present. I really want to thank actually Essex Bulk Services for the participation through the scheme. They were a fantastic company who really engaged with their drivers, who really made a sustainable change in their business and are taking V7 seriously. I want to thank Geraint as well, and the FORS partnership. We've really appreciated all the support and enjoy working with you guys on this challenge, and no doubt more requirements to come in the future. And if anyone has any questions, please use the chat function. Thank you very much for your time today, and we can hand over to you, Holly.
Thank you so much, William, Ian, and Geraint for speaking. William, just stay on this slide, I think, so people can scan the QR code if they would like to book an appointment with you. And I actually have a question to kick it off. So my first question actually is for Ian. Sorry to put you under the spotlight, but you mentioned driver buy-in and how important that is for everything, really. I just wanted to know if you have any advice on how to best get drivers, involved and keen for the changes that constantly come.
For us, it's regularly communicating with them, and that is one of the bits why we've reversed some of our decisions, because we moved our office to a solo office, so it was divorced from any of our sites. And the problem being is then the drivers having access to us, and hence the reason why we're moving back to a site in West Thurrock where the drivers can actually get access to us personally. But it's having that personal approach. Some of my team, we do have offices on some of our customer sites that we lodge in occasionally. I mean, I was at one of the sites for a couple of days this week, and the drivers coming in to see you, they feel like they're part of the team if they can come and speak to you, share their problems, what issues they've got going on, and you can sort them problems out. Even if it's down to coming to get a piece of safety equipment, it's easier if you can see them rather than you just sending it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a difference. Thank you. And my next question is for William or Shrey. What are the biggest challenges fleets face when transitioning to more sustainable operations?
Yeah, very good question. I think one of the biggest challenges operators can face is access to guidance that takes the terminology and makes it a little bit easier. There's a lot of requirements out there, and sustainability has its own jargon. There are so many acronyms in sustainability, but what's really critical for operators to understand is actually a lot of the stuff they are already doing, things like reporting on emissions, like Geraint said. You may already have a lot of your fleet emissions data. It's just about making sure that it fully covers all of the scopes and categories expected for that kind of reporting protocol each year. So first thing I'd say is take a look through what you've already got, focus on the areas where you need to improve, and do it in small bite-sized chunks. Many operators already have a day job to do. You're not going to be able to become a perfect sustainability company overnight. This is about improvement and progress. You don't have to solve every challenge at once. So hopefully you come through the process, have a plan that's going to take a couple of years to implement, and then put that in a practical way. Don't just jump. And I think I've seen guidance online about not jumping to reduce. Make sure you fully understand your position. You understand your carbon baseline, you understand the starting point for the marathon that's ahead. It's not a sprint, this is a long-term change. So take your time, get it right the first time round, and then you'll be smooth sailing thereon.
You might have answered this already, but what are the key things operators need to get right to succeed with the assessment?
Very much depends on the business. Some businesses will have different elements of E, S, and G that are more critical. If you have gaps in your environmental asset, you don't plan for, say, If you have environmental aspects such as your carbon reporting, you handle chemicals, or the goods that you move are quite sensitive, then it's more likely you're going to be much more intense on the environmental pillars. If you have quite an extended business with multiple operating sites, it's more than likely that your social and your governance aspects are going to be far more critical, because if you don't have a good structure and communication network, you're not going to be able to really cascade the action you need down to your drivers. So as Ian said, they have at EBS put in place a communication system. One of the big opportunities for them was to get that in place to help in that change on the road for their drivers. You know, realistically as well, eco driving and all those kinds of practices do have an impact on fuel consumption, do have an impact on the bottom line. So for their business, that social and communication aspect was more important. So I don't want to say that it's everything, but I think what's critical is to identify the area that's most in need of support in the upcoming regulations and really tackle one or two key areas.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, William. We haven't had any questions through. Oh, Geraint?
Yeah, just with my operator's hat on, what if now, for argument's sake, I decide I don't buy into any of this? I simply can't be bothered. What will be the penalties? You know, I've got to pay my drivers next Friday. I got new trucks on order, worrying about how I'm going to pay for them. Everything's going up. Drivers want more money. The fitters want more money. What am I going to do? You know, why do I have to do this? What are the penalties if I don't?
Who's that to?
Oh, it's to you. Sorry, William. Sorry. Yeah. So what would happen? What would be the consequences then? What would a regulator do? You know, how big are the fines then?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a very good question, and one I think you know the answer to as well yourself, right? But I think the really interesting thing is it depends on the regulation and who's enforcing it. But take a high level, the net zero and some of those elements of ESG, you know, health and safety is a legal requirement. You can't run a business unless you're safe and compliant in the UK anyway. And much the same way, net zero is going down the same trajectory. You will need to be able to evidence that your business has gone through that change and is compliant in order to have your social license to operate, whether that's company house or as a business. So yes, at a high level, that's the biggest risk, but that's a long-term risk. The more immediate ones are those upcoming reporting regulations, like the CSRD. Now, those submission portals that are made with the ESG data, they are going to be done through a centralized portal. Some of this is still being worked out, and then they will potentially be enforceable as well, with fines and penalties up to things like 10% of annual revenue, for instance. So if you were found to be in breach, much like financial grade data, you may be expected to have a financial fine and penalty. And that doesn't just go at the top level of the company. Parts of the regulations stipulate that even down to managerial level, you can expect fines and even jail time potentially for any breaches. So it's not a case of the company taking a fine. It's also a case of the individuals who are responsible for handling that data potentially having fines too. Of course, this is an evolving picture, and this is the first round of regulations in some cases. And there's new regulation coming that's continue to pull this forward. So that's why it's really important to get it in place now, because you're going to save yourself a very large headache longer term as well. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And I think it's going to be, in context then, is like non-compliance with any other piece of legislation that me as an operator that I would have to comply with if I suddenly decided that I'm not going to comply with the 11O licensing undertakings because I can't afford it or whatever. It's simply not an option. I have to comply with the 11O license undertakings because I will lose my operator's license, because sooner or later I'm going to have an encounter, I'm going to have a visit, I'm going to end up with a PI, and I'm going to be out of business. So it does put it into context like that, or a GDPR breach, or, you know, I know the fines for that are massive, or like you've already touched on there, the HSE, or people like the Environment Agency or Natural Resources Wales in Wales. You know, and you've got your fee for intervention and all the rest of it. So yeah, I get it.
I think it's also a great opportunity. I think sometimes people look at the downside. These kinds of standards are also being put in place corporately because we're trying to drive more more responsible and more efficient businesses as well.
Yeah.
You know, people are getting involved in these schemes and participating. The businesses that are taking this forward, really taking it seriously and leading in this area, are realizing big cost saving benefits, big cultural benefits as well, because the staff are happy as a result. If you have good communication systems like Essex Bulk Services have done, bringing it back to the operators and drivers, it can have a really fundamental and positive impact within businesses. So rather than looking at necessarily on the downside, I also really say to operators, look at the opportunities ahead of you. If you see something on the gap or the plan that isn't there, it's actually a really good opportunity to take lead and impress your customers. Go have a conversation with your supplier customer, say, actually, we've committed to net zero, we've committed to these standards, and it can be a great thing to win business.
Brilliant, thank you.
Ollie?
Thank you. We actually have had a question come through in the Q&A section for Geraint. So it reads, as FORS Bronze, if a company, we have ISO certification and ECO VADIS Gold Standard, will that help with the new requirement of FORS version 7, also doing ESOS reporting? Sorry, I probably butchered that a little bit, but hopefully you understand what I mean.
I think I understand the context of the question. Now, to flip that, I was a FORS Gold operator for many, many years, and I did the ISO standard as well because customers mandated that. People wanted FORS Gold for particular work, but ISO 14001 as well. And I used my FORS Gold data and my FORS Gold information for ISO 14001. So when you sort of reverse that, you know, for a FORS Bronze operator, it's going to be a massive help to you to have that. You're going to be doing a lot of the stuff that you're going to need already. You know, you're going to have to do some tweaks and some fine tuning here and there. You know, it's like other standards. You know, we were part of other standards as well, but FORS did give a good framework for that, and there's a lot of crossover. So on that basis, yes. And like Holly's already put in the chat the link to the to those changes in simple form, and it's, you know, you don't have to read the full version 7 and every granular detail, a bit of bedtime reading, but you can just go, it's just on I think it's 1 or 2 pages. I was looking at it earlier on today. So the key changes are there in every section, so just have a look at that, and that will help you along the way as well. And you know, we're here to help. You know, the theme for this year's FORS conference is to drive and thrive, or thrive and drive, sorry. But also you could add on there survive, because this sort of thing is going to help you survive in the challenges that lay ahead. You know, we've got economic challenges, we've got regulatory challenges, and you know, I like I keep saying, you know, I see things with an operator's lens, and it's very important that FORS is aligned with those changes, and you know, is future-proofing your respective businesses.
Can I add something on, Holly?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I also want to say, Cecile, congratulations. We're an EcoVadis Platinum company. We're also an accredited training consulting partner, and that's a great achievement to get the gold. I think the other thing that I would say is, you know, that's an external certification for ISO. The EMS is really going to serve you well for the environmental aspects of your business. You know, EcoVadis is going to come for areas like social and labour standards, which are also in V7. And I think the other thing to keep in mind, probably moving forward, like ESOS reporting, energy management systems are critical to realizing cost savings too. This is not about creating more things to do. This is also about harmonizing and bringing that together for fleet operators. So you will see commonality in those standards, but it will start to centralize. And I think FORS is a really valuable credential to help sustainable fleet operators moving forward, and they really focusing on the critical elements that you need. There will be gaps, and there will be gaps between those different standards, and there'll be some shared commonality between them. But ultimately, as long as you're in line with the mandatory standards and you're in line with FORS, which is also linked to the government in the UK, you've got the mandatory elements really covered, the stuff you really critically need to do as well. That underpins that all.
Thanks, William. I will give everyone a minute or so to ask any questions.
I've got a quick
And
question for
oh,
Ian,
sure.
actually. Ian, one thing, particularly when it comes to sustainability, is around talent and retention and other elements. And I know that was quite important for Essex Bolt Services. You know, how is sustainability impacting operators or new operators in the market? And what does that mean for recruitment at Essex Bolt Services?
I mean, recruitment with most transport businesses, recruitment at times can be tough. I mean, we are constantly advertising for drivers with over 120 drivers. You're always on a churn of drivers. You always get some coming, some going, and recruiting them. But if you can advertise the fact that you are sustainable, you are inclusive, it helps. It's one of our selling features. We're still a family business, even though we've got slightly different owners. We still run as a family business. We're all treated as family, so sustainability, as gradually it gets more and more traction out there, it's going to be a selling feature that we're going to have to use.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We might wrap it up here if no one has any further comments or questions. Fantastic. So yeah, as a reminder, the webinar recording will be circulated today. And just thank you so much to the presenters and for everyone who has joined as well. Thank
For
you.
those
Have
of
a
you who have
wonderful...
signed up for the conference, I'll see you all at the FORS conference. Sorry, Holly.
No, that's okay. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah, definitely. Same for me. So looking forward to being there. And if you are going, please drop us a line or a note. It'd be lovely to see you all face to face. Really looking forward to it.
It'll be a really good day. Thank you, everyone, again, and have a
Thanks.
wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye.